Imagine the entire country is prospering, and everything seems right in the world. You feel that you and every American have a bright future ahead. But now imagine that the future you thought you had in mind doesn't happen. What if the very land you grew up on, the land that you and your family depend on, was ripped from Earth itself? The Dust Bowl was a devastating period for millions of people in the US, ruining families and dreams. John Steinbeck, one of America's most notable 20th century novelists, sought to capture the details of their hardships in order to advocate social change. Steinbeck was born not far from the beautiful coastline of Northern California in 1902. He was born as Salinas to John Ernst Steinbeck, a hard-working father who tried many jobs to keep his family fed, and Olive Hamilton Steinbeck, a former well-educated school teacher. From a young age, Steinbeck was shy but insightful, examining the enterprising Westerners in his hometown, which would influence his writing career. Steinbeck decided to become a writer when he was 14, frequently writing poems and stories in his bedroom. In 1919, he enrolled at Stanford University to learn literature and creative writing. 6 years later, he left to find leisure to perfect his writing skills. During the period between 1929 and 1945, John Steinbeck represented a significant social turning point in the US to some degree, as his writing gave a humanistic perspective on migrant workers to a wide audience. Firstly, according to John Witt, a professor of journalism at the University of Colorado at Boulder, John Steinbeck based much of his fiction on actual events and experimented with several genres of nonfiction, including personal essays, travel writing, and political and social commentary. Steinbeck visited several migrant worker camps. There, he spoke to migrants and listened to their stories, writing a series of articles named The Harvest Gypsies in 1936. He described the desperate conditions the Dust Bowl refugees often faced, such as hunger, unsanitary living quarters, and wage exploitation. He writes in Article 1, thousands of them are crossing the borders in ancient rattling automobiles, destitute and hungry and homeless, ready to accept any pay so that they may eat and feed their children. Steinbeck's insightful journalism shed light on the realities of migrant workers, increasing people's awareness and leading them to action. The experience of meeting the workers firsthand also fueled much of his vision for his sixth novel, The Grapes of Wrath, which he finished in 1939. In it, a family travels to California from Oklahoma in search of a better life. During the journey, they come across difficulties, such as discrimination and corruption of big businesses. The book became a financial success not long after its publication. In its first year of release, it sold 438,900 copies. Due to its immense popularity, Steinbeck's messages easily reached the public. For example, Steinbeck examined the state of social disparity in his book. Cyrus Ernesto Zerzadeh, a professor of political science at the University of Connecticut, writes that the episodes in Steinbeck's novel cumulatively advance a more extreme position, that local and state governments are responsive only to business interests. At the time, people knew that the interest group politics in the US had an upper-class bias. To elaborate, upper-income groups were able to influence elections and policy outcomes because they had more financial resources. But Steinbeck takes one step further, dissuading readers from participating in conventional politics and recognizing the issue of interest group power. The novel also had a very influential fan, First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. She published a review in her widely read newspaper called My Day. Now, I must tell you that I have just finished a book which is an unforgettable experience in reading. The horrors of the picture, so well drawn, make you dread sometimes to begin the next chapter, and yet you cannot lay the book down or even skip a page. Visiting a labor camp herself after being inspired by the book, the First Lady supported Steinbeck's descriptions as being accurate. She even called for congressional hearings that led to changes in the labor regulations controlling migrant camps. However, John Steinbeck's efforts were limited, as the film adaptation of the book was not as influential. The film's political message was much toned down compared to the book. Instead of ending with the eldest daughter breastfeeding a starved man, the movie ends with Tom leading and Ma Jade giving an inspirational speech. This change was purposely made by the director, as the original ending in the book was too controversial. The act of breastfeeding an adult man seemed too sexual and inappropriate, even though it was supposed to be a sign of hope and life during desperate times. This change drastically reduced the effects of the story and its social motives. Charles Poore, a book reviewer, wrote in the New York Times newspaper in 1939, before the release of the movie, that the most memorable scene is the last one. He continued to say that in a more sentimental mood, Mr. Steinbeck might have provided soft music and a rosy ending, and if he'd done that, he would have invalidated the main truths of his story. Nevertheless, John Steinbeck was able to influence many people through his journalism and books. He gave insightful views on the desperate conditions of migrant workers. leading a way for impactful social changes.